Welcome to RICO 12. My name is Justin. I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a recovering addict, and I'm blessed to be the host of this meeting and podcast. RICO 12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking this path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented so many fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, and we look forward to continuing to add to the diversity of speakers and backgrounds. And by the way, thank you. Last week, I put out a thing for members of Gamblers Anonymous, and I've got a couple of speakers already lined up for later this year from that fellowship, because that's one that we haven't had people from before. Excited about that. Thank you all, listening audience, who brought that together. So today's speaker for the 159th meeting is Evie S., whose topic will be Life Changes Through 35 Years in Recovery. And we'll get to her talk in the Q&A afterwards in just a minute. First, for some business. The RICO 12 family of recovery resources launched a new service for all addicts and those seeking the solution. It's another recovery meeting podcast called RICO 12 Shares. Now, RICO 12 Shares is an open to anyone, anytime, asynchronous, shares-only, unaffiliated 12-step meeting. All are welcome to record a solution-based share that is uploaded to be part of a short 20-minute recorded recovery meeting available in podcast format anytime, anywhere. To listen to any of the 12 now meetings uploaded so far, or to learn more and record a share of your own, please visit www.rico12.com/shares. That's RECO12.com/shares. Or click on the links that I'll put in the show notes and the chat of the live meeting here when we get going. There are also a couple of other RICO 12 family of recovery resources on the horizon that I'm super excited about, one of which is being finalized this week, and I'm going to make that general announcement now. This is putting it out there for the first time. Super excited about this and what further developments may come from this project. This next project is a collaboration between RICO 12 recovery resources and recoveryguy.org. It's a big book forum, a big book study called The First 164, where the big book will be gone through line by line by a dynamic, longtime big book enthusiast, Robert P., who is also a two-time guest speaker on RICO 12, who will teach the big book to people from at all levels of recovery experience and addictions. Now, as mentioned, more information will be forthcoming, but the first meeting of this first 164 happens today on Zoom at 1:00 p.m. Pacific time in about, 3 hours? Yeah, 3 hours from now. You're welcome to join in there. And I'll put the meeting information in the chat of this live meeting and in the show notes. And for all of these things, your donations and subscriptions are making this all possible, as there are costs to build and maintain all of them. Thank you. So on that note, RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal and Venmo, through the links that will be in the show notes and the chat. And we have also started a new monthly subscription program called RICO 12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at rico12.com/support. And the links will be in the show notes and in the chat. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce today's guest speaker for today, Evie S., who was a previous speaker on meeting number 116 back in August of 2022. Now here's a little bit about Evie. Evie has been in CoDA for 35 years and has done service throughout most of that time at every level of the fellowship in 3 different CoDA communities and at the world level. She found CoDA after many years of therapy and other personal development efforts, and believes that CoDA and the 12 steps have given her the most important tools she needed to heal her relationships, especially with members of her family of origin. She met the love of her life through recovery, and they were together for 31 years and married for 29 before he passed away just this last June. Their relationship went through many periods of struggle, and she truly believes that it would not have survived without the CoDA tools. Her ongoing CoDA recovery and her many CoDA friends have been her primary support during this past difficult year. Take it away, Evie. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everybody. My name's Evie, and I'm so grateful to be in recovery from my codependency. I just want to change my view. So, and just to let you know, somebody was supposed to come and pick up my dog and take her for a walk, but they haven't come yet. So don't be surprised if you hear a little bit of barking. Okay, so as I said, my name's Evie, and I'm so grateful to be in recovery from my codependency. I was lucky enough to find CoDA when it was just over a year old because I was actively looking for it. I had a lot of friends who were in other 12-step programs, and I didn't really qualify for any of them. So I was looking for something for me, and a friend of mine brought me a flyer that they had gotten at a meeting. And I went to my first CoDA meeting, and I've been doing it ever since. So very little bit of background. I grew up in a family. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. She was not in the camps. Her family was smart enough to get out of the German part of France where they lived. She lived in the south of France through her major teenage years during the Holocaust, which really messed with her. She met my father. She met my father right after the war. He was an American serviceman. I'm not going to waste time on telling you the romantic story, but anyway, they got married in June of 1946, and I was conceived on their honeymoon in the south of France and born in Brooklyn. How's that for a come down, right? So, my mother was very messed up because of that. I mean, she came across as a loving person, but she wanted to make me what she wanted me to be. And I am the most different one in my family. Always was, and my father was, kind of a Casper milquetoast. So my growing up years were challenging in a lot of ways. I discovered boys at 9 years old and never looked back. And I just went from one relationship, it was crazy. And I managed to be married and divorced twice by the time I was, like I said, okay, it'll be quiet from now on. So I managed to be married and divorced twice by the time I was 28, and I had a 2.5-year-old son, and I figured I got to do something. So I started doing therapy. I did a lot of therapy. I did the S training. I don't know if any of you know that. It's been called Forum and Landmark also. That actually helped me amazingly. But something was missing. And I was just turning 40 when I actually got into a relationship in a healthy manner for the first time in my life. I dated multiple people because I had been one of those people that was, let's go to the movies and get married. I mean, that's what I just was so desperate for love. So I got into a relationship with a really nice person. And unfortunately, it wasn't working. He had just discovered he was an adult child of an alcoholic. It just wasn't working. Turns out in the end, he was not the best match for me. And that was when I discovered CoDA and walked into my first CoDA meeting and knew I was where I belonged. So I started doing CoDA. Back in those days, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. CoDA was a year old. The only literature we had was 3 step pamphlets. So I want to put a plug in for what Justin was saying about the meeting that's going to, or something that's going to be based on the AA Big Book. That's how I learned my recovery. I found the Joe and Charlie AA Big Book workshops, and I've probably done 6 of them in my life. Plus I've listened online. That's how I learned my recovery. And all I did was I changed the word alcoholic to codependent and drinking to thinking. and it fit perfectly. So anyway, about a year and a half after I got into CoDA, I met this guy. Actually, we met online. It's very interesting. In 1989, because we both worked for the same computer company. I started working with computers in 1967. And we met on a 12-step notes file, which was like a Google group. And we became friends. And he supported me through some difficult times. And about 15 months after we became friends, we had our one date because we realized we were already in love. And, we figured we had it made, both of us in CoDA. Of course, at that point, I had 3 years in CoDA, he had 2. Not a lot of recovery at that point. It was a third marriage for both of us, and we thought we had it made. I'm going to come back to my marriage in a little bit, but I just want to talk a little bit because I said I would talk about what my life has been over my 35 years of recovery. One of the first things that happened was that I reached a point where I learned to shut my mouth with my mother. My mother, being a Holocaust survivor, and, she had some crap earlier in her life too, that was, she would come out with some of the most bizarre statements, and I would argue with her. It was absolutely crazy. And I realized finally, I had, thanks to all the therapy and all the other stuff in my 3 years, or at that point, it was probably 4 years in CoDA, I realized that arguing with her was absolutely fruitless. And I had developed enough self-worth at that point where I was actually able, for the first time, she said something absolutely wacko, and I just shut my mouth. And so she shut hers because she had nobody to argue with. And that was a huge turning point. And so little by little, fairly quickly, I was able to heal my relationship with my mother. I forgave her. I truly believe she never wanted anything but the best for me. And she just wasn't capable of doing any better than she did. And the other thing that I learned about my relationship with my mother was that if I acknowledged her before I said something, she could then listen to me. So if she'd tell me to do something, I would say something to her like, Mom, I know you're trying to help, and the way you're going about it just isn't helping. And that was key, because she felt acknowledged for the fact that she was trying to help me. And then I could say to her, this is what, whatever, this is what kind of help I could use, or this is what I feel is the right thing for me. And she could hear me. So that was great. My relationship with my father, it was never as bad as with my mother. However, I forgot to mention this part. So I never cared. I grew up in a Jewish family. Obviously, my mother was a Holocaust survivor. And I never cared whether I dated Jewish guys or not, because it just wasn't important to me. So when I got to college and I met my college boyfriend very early in my freshman year, he wasn't Jewish, and my parents started to threaten to disown me if I married him, which was devastating to me, absolutely devastating. And it was really coming from my father more than anyone. And that, my father and I were pretty much able to heal that. Although the first time I told him how awful I felt, he said, oh, we never really would have done that. And how I kept, I thought to myself, I wanted to say, you effing hypocrite, but I was healthy enough at that point not to. So my relationship with my father never got very deep again, but at least, we were okay. What are some of the other things that happened? I changed my career several times as a result of my recovery. Being a female in the computer industry back in those days, plus I ended up in management, and that was even more challenging. And so I left the computer industry once, got a master's in community social work, did some work in public health, realized it was way too slow paced for me, ended up going back to the computer industry. And then when I got laid off during the dot-com crash in 2001, I just couldn't go back. I couldn't go back. So I ended up teaching computers to middle school kids in South Los Angeles for 7 years. That was my last job. It was the lowest paying one I'd had in a long, long, long time. And it was probably the hardest one I ever had. Let's talk about being with kids who were messed up. Oh my God. Anyway, so that was what went on with my career. And through all that, my recovery was helping me to make my decisions. And, I look back on it and I say, yeah, I had an interesting career life. I really did. So let me talk a little bit about my relationship with my higher power, because that's very important to me. So because of the religious abuse I had, the word God turned me off. However, I was so drawn to the 12 steps that I just decided, okay, I'm going to act as if I believe in a higher power. I had no trouble with steps 1 and 2 because it was very obvious to me. I shouldn't say I had some trouble with step 2, but step 1, I had no problem admitting my powerlessness because I've been trying to live my own life for so long, and I wasn't doing a very good job with it, despite the fact that to all outside appearances, I looked like I had my shit together because I had a really good job, I owned my own home, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so when I got to step 2, I said, okay, I'm going to believe in a power greater than myself. I picked Yoda as my first higher power. I still love Yoda. Yoda and E.T. are two of my favorite beings because they're both so loving. Step 3, I first time through, it was hard, but I went through the motions. I can't say that I really believed it. I had no trouble with step 4. Interesting enough, a lot of people have trouble with step 4. I had no trouble with step 4 or 5. 6 and 7 were interesting to me, very interesting to me, because my first time through, I said, oh, piece of cake, no brainer. Of course I want to have all my defects and shortcomings removed. Little did I know. And 8 and 9, I really didn't have any trouble with 8 and 9, and on and on. Anyway, so to come back to what my higher power is today, I finally realized that what my higher power, and it evolved over time, my higher power is my true self, my healthy true self, connected to the rest of the universe. And it's really interesting because I recently found this, I don't know if it's a prayer, or anyway, aphorism, something like that, this is the way I say it. My higher power is the power within me. I'm sorry. Yeah, the power of my higher power is within me. I said it wrong. The power of my higher power is within me. The grace of my higher power surrounds me. And to me, that fits so perfectly with my belief in what my higher power is. The power of my higher power is within me, my true self. The grace of my higher power surrounds me. That's the rest of the universe. So I say that to myself at night now when I go to bed. It really helps me to sleep. The other thing I do regularly these days is CoDA has a third step prayer. Higher power, I give to you all that I am and all that I will be for your healing and direction. Please make new this day as I release all my worries and fears, knowing you are, the way it's normally done is knowing you are beside me. I say, knowing you are both within me and all around me. Please help me to open myself to your love, to allow your love to heal my wounds, and to allow your love to flow through me and from me to those around me. I love that prayer. By the way, the prayers I'm saying, not the one I just said about the power of my higher power is within me. That's not a CoDA prayer, but the third step prayer and the seventh step prayer I'm about to say are both on the CoDA.org website. The seventh step prayer that I say, higher power, I'll do it the way that it's written. Higher power, please remove from me all my defects of character, relieving me of the burden of my past. I put my hand in yours, trusting that the void that has been created will be filled with your unconditional love for me and for those in my life. What's key about that prayer for me is the word, the void. When I finally realized that I had completely skipped over steps 6 and 7, I went back and realized that it was because what happened, no, not because, it was, the result of it was that I would say, step 6, yeah, I'm entirely ready to have my higher power remove all this stuff from me. I would ask my higher power to remove it. And then immediately afterwards, because of the void, I would take it back. I would immediately take it back. So that word void was really, really, really important to me. So those are things that have helped my life so much. I say those prayers every single day. One of the other things I can't realize, and it's fairly not, within the probably last 10 years, my goal in recovery is to live an emotionally and spiritually happy, healthy, and peaceful life of ease, filled with love, kindness, courage, compassion, safety, and the belief that I am enough, I am lovable, and I am loved. And my recovery has brought me to that, very much to that. I continue to work my program every day, every hour if I need it, every minute if I need it. Sometimes the best that I can do is say, higher power, help me. Not that much anymore. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I'm still, that much of a basket case, but there are times, okay, so let me get back to because I said I'd come back to my relationship with my husband. So we really thought we had it made when we got together because we figured we're both in recovery. Oh my God. And everybody who we knew when they realized we were together, they said, oh, we always thought you guys belonged together. But then, of course, all our shit started to come out. And he became very verbally abusive. And I went back and forth between responding verbally abusively or going into victim mode. And, I'm an extremely strong-willed person, both of us. He was the same way. It's one of the reasons our marriage worked, because we just made up our mind we were going to do what we needed to do to make it work, unless staying in it was so harmful to one or the other of us that we had to leave to protect ourselves. And thankfully, we never got to that point. We came close a few times. We did couples therapy. One of the things I wanted to mention was, for me to go into victim mode, being such a strong person, I have so much empathy for all the abused women in this world and there are abused men also, don't get me wrong, but there's far more abused women. Because if somebody like me could go into victim mode, then anybody could. So the good news is we got into couples therapy. We had a wonderful therapist. He really helped us. We kept both working our CoDA programs, and little by little it got better. The last at least 20 years of our life, maybe even more, was just incredible together. We were best friends before we realized we were in love. We were best friends. We were husband and wife, and we were also each other's primary fellow travelers in recovery. And his loss has just been devastating for me. And yet, thanks to my CoDA recovery, I function. I function. I'm getting better. I do what I need to do. I saw my primary care physician, and I had my physical last week, and we decided that I did need a slight antidepressant, just to help me, get through this difficult time, because it's so hard. Oh my God, I'm in this huge house. So we ended up we met in the Boston area. We lived in Southern California for 19 years because my whole family had migrated out there. We finally realized it was never going to really feel like home, moved back to New England, for which we were both so grateful. And we ended up with this huge house, 3,100 square feet for the two of us and our dog. Now it's just me and our dog. But we wanted a house in, I've got trees all around. You can see, that's a picture of what I see. I'm up in a loft. I wanted a sunroom, and, I love this house, but boy, it's hard without him. And yet I have all my CoDA recovery friends. They are my primary source of support. My family's, I've got no family nearby. I have my husband's family. It's in the Boston area, and they're great. But so anyway, there are about a million other things I could have covered, but in 25 minutes, covering 35 years is quite a bit to try to cover. So I hope that I've given people the message of how important my CoDA recovery has been. I want to say one more thing. I believe that codependency is the basis of all the other addictions. And if you really read the AA Big Book, and they talk about what's, what's going on inside, they're really talking about codependency. And, alcohol, drugs, all that stuff, workaholism, that's one of mine, um, are all a way of have all been ways of dealing with my codependency. So I am really grateful that I found CoDA as my primary recovery program. I'll go to any meeting today, but CoDA will always be my primary program. So anyway, thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you so much for your share there, Evie. Your experience, strength, and hope are powerful, and I appreciate the vulnerability and the sharing of your relationship. Good stuff. There was one part of your share, and it was right in the middle of what you were sharing what your goal is. Your phrase, your life statement, where the recording paused for about, it didn't pause, it froze for about 5 seconds. Can you repeat that phrase for us, please?
Sure. My goal is to live an emotionally and spiritually happy, healthy, and peaceful life of ease, filled with love, kindness, courage, compassion, and the belief that I am enough, I am lovable, and I am loved. And what I forgot to mention is that I found my spirituality in CoDA. I never had a spiritual life before that. I found it in CoDA.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so a reminder to our live audience, if you have questions for Evie, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of the screen. Looks like 2 speech bubbles over the top of each other. We'll get to those as we go along. I've written down a few questions here for her also that are based on things that she shared. Please feel free to type in any of those questions. But I'd like to start out here. You mentioned, you said, as I went through the steps, things were going along, and then step 6, 7, I thought was really easy, but oh boy, was there more to it than just the 2 paragraphs that are in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous on steps 6 and 7. Tell us a little bit more about that development and realization of there's more to step 6 and 7 than just, hey, I want to get rid of my character defects. Hey, higher power, please take my character defects away. Tell us more about that.
Okay. Well, step 6, saying I want to get rid of them, was coming from my head. It was coming from my head. The problem was it wasn't coming from my gut, my heart. That's how I really differentiate. And unfortunately, too often when I'm in my head, I'm either operating out of my ego or my wounded self. Okay. So my ego and my wounded self were like, of course I want, this stuff's not working for me. So of course I want it removed. I had to get to the point where in my gut, I was willing to do what needed to be done to have them removed. And the way I say it today, I say, higher power, please remove from me all the things that get in the way of my being able to lead and emotionally and spiritually happy, healthy, et cetera, what my goal is. Okay. Okay. So that was step 6. So because of the fact that it was coming from my head, when I got to step 7, I said to myself, of course it's a no-brainer. I'm going to ask my higher power. First of all, I didn't yet have a good relationship with the higher power. The fact that I picked Yoda was great because at least it was, I was heading in the right direction. I was heading, to a loving higher power. And then, but I never got to the place where in my gut, not back then, I never did. In my gut, I was willing to do what absolutely needed to be done for me to actually have that stuff removed. And there were all sorts of things that were included in that. I have an obsession with time. My husband used to call me the crazy lady with the stopwatch. I had an obsession with with time. I lived my life in fear underneath everything. I think that's true of a lot of us, most of us probably. But having a Holocaust survivor parent and being born so soon after the war, I got the message in utero that the world was not a safe place. But it was very hard for me. The minute I confronted that void of not using all this stuff that I was using to control. I was a control freak because I was so afraid all the time. The minute I did that, the minute I let go of that, the void terrified me, and I just couldn't hang in there. So thankfully, I was only probably 3 or 4 years into recovery when I recognized that I hadn't ever done steps 6 and 7. And I began to do them, but they still took a really, really, really long time. So I try to share that whenever I share, because I think a lot of people react that way, that it's a no-brainer. It's not.
Yeah, I agree. I remember the first time I went through the steps, my sponsor, said, okay, are you willing to have these character defects removed? Yep. Okay. Step 6 done. Are you ready to get down on your knees and pray and ask God to remove them? Yep. All right. Check. You're done. And it wasn't until years later that I was working with a sponsee who later told me, man, steps 6 and 7 have been the most meaningful of all the steps to me. I was like, really? Okay, well, I need to look at this and try and figure this out myself. And I agree now. You've brought up the void a couple of times, and how the void it was so painful that you just had to fill it back in with something rather than let it be filled by, other higher sources. Talk to us a little bit more about the void and how you go about that when you feel that void today, how you go about filling that.
Great question. Well, the most important thing I do is to allow it to be. I don't use any of my usual methods for dealing with my feeling, dealing with what's coming up. It varies depending on what I'm feeling. I love meditation. I don't do as much meditation as I'd like, but I've also done, I didn't mention this, I've done a ton of inner child work. And I don't know if that comes up in a lot of programs, but I have realized I have all these. Today I don't even call it my inner child. I call them my inner beings, because I have all these different versions of me that exist inside and pop up at different times. If I'm starting to feel, typically what happens when the void pops up is I feel very anxious. So depending on how it pops up, I might meditate. I might reach out to a fellow traveler. I might reach out to one of my inner beings. And I've done a lot of, dominant hand, non-dominant hand writing. It's funny because I was part of a group that did some inner child work very early in CoDA's existence. We actually wrote a little handbook. This was part of the group in the Boston area. And by the time we brought it to CoDA World to be published, we'd lost contact with too many people, didn't have the copyright assignments, and so it never got published. And in retrospect, I think higher power is taking care of us, because we didn't really know what we were doing. I went through a really bad depression when I lost my last high-tech job. When I was laid off, I had this huge fear of lack around money. And I went into the worst depression of my life. 13 years in recovery, and I went into the worst depression of my life. The only thing I could do was get from my bed to the couch and get to meetings. And my husband took me to the meetings, I ended up doing a lot of inner child work then and also later. Made a huge difference. So sometimes today, when I'm feeling the void, I will look to see which inner being is the one that's feeling the anxiety. It's typically anxiety or whatever, and I will talk to them. I don't need to write anymore because we have developed such a good relationship.
Yeah, thank you for that, and appreciate that. A reminder to our live audience: if you have questions for Evie, type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. We'll get to those. I've got a couple that have come in. This one's from an anonymous attendee. They say, "I hear so much kindness and compassion in your share. Thank you so much." And then the question continues about with your goal. How did you come up with that goal? Is that something you found from recovery material? Is that something you worked through, in your own thing? And also, well, we'll go to that with your goal. How did you come up with that?
Okay, so it was a whole bunch of things coming together at the right time. One of the major ones was I did a lot of, when I was living in Southern California, I found most amazing yoga instructor. Not only was she an incredible yoga instructor, but she was one of the most spiritual people I had ever met. And when we were doing Shavasana one day, she said something, and I don't even remember what the exact words were, but out of that, what she said, I got the framework of it. And so I just started to repeat what she had said, and I can't even remember what because I've been doing the whole thing for so long now. And then as I was doing it, I would say, that isn't quite right for me. Let me see what makes, and I would connect with my higher power. What makes more sense here? Did I say, by the way, about with the void that I talk to my higher power and ask my higher power for help? I think I skipped over that, but that's always my first step. Anyway, so little by little, it evolved. It certainly wasn't I didn't read it anywhere, but things were, some of the things were the things that I wanted in my life. I want to be happy, healthy, peaceful. I want to be courageous. I forgot to mention, I say step 4 a little bit differently. I say I made a loving, searching, and courageous moral inventory of myself, because I'm never going to be fearless. But if I'm courageous, I can do a really good job. So, that's how it evolved.
Love it. Thank you so much. And I think this next question, I'm going to combine it in from 2 different questions. One's from Sam, one's from an anonymous attendee. The question is, how do you help yourself be in a place of feeling lovable and loved when it doesn't seem like you are? And maybe others don't seem to love you either. And then mix that in with, living your life not as a victim. So kind of take those 2 and put them together and let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. So that didn't come easily. Okay. Because, I never felt lovable growing up. That's what I was searching for. I didn't get the message from my parents that I was lovable, even though in retrospect, they loved me very much. So the most important thing for me was to develop the love for myself. And that came little by little from acknowledging my self-worth. And that didn't come easy. That didn't come, oh my God, I was so hard on myself. I just thought, well, because the message I got growing up, I would bring home a report card that was all A's and one B. All I would ever hear about were the B's. My parents actually, my mother grounded me for 2 months because I only had a B average one semester. And she told me that if at the end of the next marking period, it wasn't an A average, she'd ground me again for 2 months. I mean, absolutely, just, so I felt like I was a piece of shit. And little by little, as I worked my steps and as I connected with other healthy people, and as I kept connecting with my higher power, I began to develop self-worth. And that was the single most important thing that I needed in all, in all my recovery, to begin to believe that I could be lovable. What was the victim? The question disappeared. The victim part was.
It was just basically how do you apply the goals that you've done and these lessons you've learned to not be a victim.
Okay. Well, it's also tied in with developing more self-worth and recognizing, and again, this was a therapy, and especially couples therapy was really important in this, to recognize that the way that people were interacting with me had much more to do with them than with me. They were operating out of their issues. And I just happened to be, an easy target. And I believe that the relationship that my husband and I developed, the basis for both of us was that we developed self-worth. And as a result of having developed self-worth, we didn't act out as much, and we were open to hearing what the other one needed, particularly when it was presented in a healthier manner, which we were able to do because we had developed more self-worth. I know that was very wordy, but I think I got the message across.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. We've got another question come in from Rowan. Rowan says, it's great to hear you talking about your inner child and family. Rowan says, I have 12 members of my inner family I can talk to. Have you found going to ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, helpful? I'm also in a terrible depression right now. Did you find working with them help you heal from it, that depression?
Okay. I went to some when I first got into CoDA, I was also going to ACOA meetings because we didn't have a lot of CoDA meetings. Even though neither of my parents were alcoholics. Today, in some ways, I actually prefer a lot about ACA because, and it's changed its focus. Today it's adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. Their big book has an unbelievable chapter about, reparenting. I'm also part of a group. I have a Sunday morning Zoom inner child meeting that I go to. I helped start, and we've used a bunch of different things. Right now, we're using the Loving Parent Guidebook, the ACA Loving Parent Guidebook. In many ways, well, CoDA made a decision a long time ago not to focus on inner child. They've turned it around. As a matter of fact, this year, hopefully, there's a book coming out about growing up. I forget what they don't even know what the title is yet. About reparenting your inner child. So yeah, I mean, CoDA or ACA. It really depends on the meeting. Some meetings are terrific. Some meetings aren't healthy. It's. How do I want to do this? The Sunday morning inner child meeting that I'm part of is not listed as a CoDA meeting or an ACA meeting. We made a conscious decision not to do that.
Would you be willing to share that link with me, and I can post it in the show notes of the podcast?
Sure. That's
okay.
a great idea. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a good way to do that. So just email me that link, and I'll put right after we're done, and I'll put it in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in joining in that Sunday morning meeting with the inner child work, please check the show notes of the podcast when it comes out. Excellent. Thank you, Evie. Got a couple more questions here. First of all, I guess let's go back. Did you finish answering that question that you wanted to answer there?
I think I did.
Okay.
Can you?
I think you did
who asked
too.
It? Can the person who asked it?
They can put something in the chat if they have further questions. Yep.
Yeah, I kind of lost track.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. All right. We have another question that come in. It's really hard to find a balance with being responsible for my actions and not being accountable for my spouse's actions or feelings, especially since I'm an addict and a betrayer and my spouse is not. How do you clarify what you're responsible for in your interactions with others?
I use the fourth step. I use the fourth step chart. I have a version that I've expanded a little bit, because I always use the AA version, particularly having done so many Joe and Charlie big book workshops. It's not, and it's, the most important thing is, I think, for each of us, what my husband and I learned was for each of us to be willing to take responsibility for our part. Yes, Sam. Sam has asked if I can share my expanded four-step chart also. I'll send that to you also.
Awesome.
Justin.
I'll post it in the podcast. Awesome.
I got a bunch of stuff that I can share with you and you can give to people.
Excellent.
Did I finish?
I think you touched on what you're doing. Yeah. I analyze those things through going through a fourth step, you know, basically. And if you wouldn't mind emailing me that chart, and if anybody out there in the audience has any questions, send me an email at reco12pod@gmail.com, reco12pod@gmail.com. And I'll facilitate that connection between you and Evie and get those things to you that way. Excellent. Yeah. Evie, before we wrap things up, are there any other words of wisdom that you have for us as we do that?
I just want to say that I want to encourage people not to get discouraged. I talked about the depression I went through when I was 13 years in recovery. It took me a month to get through that. It wasn't easy. I was doing therapy. I was doing a lot of 12-step work. But the good news is that by the time I got through it, my fear of lack had virtually disappeared. Not completely, but almost disappeared. And I find that, my greatest growth comes out of my biggest pain, which isn't a lot of fun. Nobody ever said recovery was going to be fun. but I remember the phrase, the book, whatever. I can't even remember who. There was some back in the 80s. Oh my God, there were so many books that were written. What you can heal, what you can feel. It might have been Louise Hay. It might have been, anyway, it's not important, but, and, I've learned that I have to let myself feel what I'm feeling, the grief. I mean, the grief that I'm going through, I just, it made sense in this instance to start taking a slight antidepressant just to help me elevate a little bit. But I won't stay on it that long because of, I just, I've got to be able to feel my feelings, and I'm still feeling them. They're just a little bit less overwhelming. So, hopefully I've answered. I have a question for you. Sure. Do the chat notes also go in the thing you put together afterwards?
So the chat notes, I can save those.
Well, I can download them too.
Yeah, you should be able to do that, I think. It may be in the permissions. Anyways, yeah, but all questions that are asked in the Q&A, I can save and keep there. The chat notes are a little bit more difficult, but we can do that here. And so, yes, we got another question.
I haven't had a chance to read the chats.
Mm-hmm.
I've been busy.
No worries. There's only been a few of them. The book that you just mentioned, You Can Heal What You Can Feel. Someone said, I think that's John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
No, I don't think it is John Gray. Okay. Actually, I think it's somebody else. But
I'll look it up and I'll find it and put it in the show notes of the meeting. And then contact information they're asking for. We won't put that here in the recorded thing.
I prefer that they contact you and you contact me, and I will give permit, one
at a time permission.
One at
Absolutely.
a time permission. Yeah. Cause otherwise I'm afraid I'll get overwhelmed.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's how I typically do it. If people want to contact Evie, please filter it through me at rico12pod@gmail.com, and we'll facilitate what we can there. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Evie. We're going to go into the closing reading here. I really appreciate your share. Good stuff. For those of you in the live audience and those of you in the podcast world, if you have further questions, please consider joining our WhatsApp community or Facebook page, and join in, ask questions, answer questions that may come up. If you're inspired from this and want to share something of your insights in a 12-step type share, please go to the Rico 12 Shares Speak Pipe link that was in the chat here and also in the show notes, and share that 2 to 4 minute share there. And if you haven't yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, well, why not? Please go do so now. It's a great way to help us get that message out to more and more people. And I invite the audience to come back next week when we'll be hearing from Daniel P., who's another first-time Rico 12 speaker, and we're excited about having him here to share and hear his experience, strength, and hope. Now let's launch off into the rest of our day with the CoDA closing prayer that Evie will say for us.
Okay. Moment of silence. We thank our higher power for all that we have received from this meeting. As we close, may we take with us the wisdom, love, acceptance, and hope of recovery.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Keep coming back. Let's trudge this happy road of destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of